Castlevania Bloodlines, released in 1994 on the Sega Mega Genesis Drive thing, and pretty much the only game in the long-running Castlevania series to grace Sega's high-definition 16-bit blast processing thing, had a massive undertaking to achieve following up on the releases of Super Castlevania 4 on Super Nintendo and the import-only Dracula X Chino Rondo on PC Engine Super CD-ROM, considered two of the finest Castlevania adventures ever conceived. And while Bloodlines isn't anywhere near as deep or structured as those two games, what it does offer is a Castlevania offering that plays just as well as any other game in the series, all the while bringing it its own unique style and flair, not only resulting in one of the shining gems in the Castlevania series, but also in the massive Genesis library, of which there are plenty of fantastic video games to be found. So Bloodlines starts by giving you the choice of playing as one of two characters, John Morris, the son of Quincy Morris from the original Dracula novel by Bram Stoker, and your prerequisite whippersnapper fellow, or you could play as Eric Lacarde, John's good friend and wielder of the spear. Be sure to choose wisely since you're committed to this choice for the rest of the game. Now on the surface, both characters control similarly enough. They can use sub-weapons, much like in Castlevania 4, assigned to a single button. Pressing up with that button will execute a super attack that consumes more gems, this game's equivalent of hearts. They can jump off and on stairs, and possess zero control over their jump in mid-air, much like the old NES games. Though they have the basics down, each character plays differently from each other. John Morris plays like an old-school whip-totting Belmont, but with a few tweaks. While he cannot whip in 8 directions or twirl it around like Simon could in Castlevania 4, he can still whip upwards at an angle while jumping, and latching onto a ceiling will allow him to swing across chasms or kick enemies in the face. He can also whip downwards if desired. On the other hand, Eric's spear can be used to attack in all 8 directions. And by holding down on the D-pad, Eric will crouch into a charging position, and by pressing the jump button, he'll vault high into the air, a useful technique to access areas that would otherwise be out of reach. Although it doesn't seem like much, it does offer subtle differences between the two characters in terms of progression, as both have different means of going from point A to point B in some cases. As such, playing as each character is almost, but not quite, its own unique adventure. Bloodlines contains 6 stages spanning various locations across Europe. Yeah, that's right. You're not stuck exploring some rinky-dink haunted castle, you get to explore locales over an entire continent, which includes a munitions factory in Germany, your clock tower level for the game, the Leaning Tower of Pisa,
fuck off!
And its really unstable foundation, and a couple other places. While 6 levels doesn't seem like much at first, they're rather long levels, especially in comparison to previous Castlevanias up to that point, Rondo of Blood being possibly the only exception. Also scattered throughout the levels are battles with mini-bosses, some of them being almost as difficult as the end bosses themselves. But looking past all the new toys presented here, Bloodlines is tried and true Castlevania gameplay at its finest. Here's a nifty concept that hasn't been done in previous Castlevanias prior to Bloodlines. A difficulty select that allows you to choose from 2 skill levels, easy and normal. Beating the game once, or inputting a code, will unlock the game's expert difficulty. The only real difference between the settings are damage and enemy placement, although the easy mode drops a couple of mid-boss fights here and there. Suffice it to say you won't get the full ending on easy, and the only way you'll get the credits is playing it on expert. Regardless of which mode you play, the levels in Bloodlines are fairly challenging in true Castlevania fashion. Whether it's navigating airborne platforms and inverted halls, dealing with giant armored knights, or outrunning rising water levels, the game will pose a significant amount of challenge to those who dare tackle it. The levels themselves are practically the highlight of Castlevania Bloodlines, rather lengthy affairs as well, but never to a point of being drawn out. Making matters more precarious is the little fact that, unlike previous Castlevania adventures, you only have 2 continues to progress, and this information gets saved into the passwords you earn between levels, so there's no way to circumvent this outside of altering the lives count in the options menu. Although the limited continues bit is taking it a little too far, it actually works somewhat and it does force you to play a somewhat smarter game this time around. Still, it does feel like somewhat of a cheap tactic to increase the challenge. 2 playable characters, 3 difficulty settings, adjustable lives count. Yeah, there's quite a bit of replay value in Bloodlines. And it also helps that this is a genuinely fun game to play, with perhaps some of the more creative levels in the series both in terms of challenge and visuals. Now let's get one thing out of the way. Bloodlines is not going to match the visual quality of Super Castlevania 4, or even Rondo of Blood for that matter. Not likely to happen due to the limited color palette of the Genesis among other things. So rather than try to mimic that style, Bloodlines adopts a graphical style of its own and as a result looks absolutely incredible, managing to pull off effects that would seem to be more than what the old Mega Drive is capable of. Of course, you have portions of the game where you have to cross a breakaway bridge comprised of skeletal remains, and selected use of shadows to darken areas, but then there's also the mirror reflection on the seawater level of the first stage, the constantly shifting Tower of Pisa, the rolling statue heads that slide off when you decapitate them, the levels that splits into 4 layers distorting your sense of vision, and the one stage where everything is inverted, including the characters and the foes. There are other moments too, and they're all wonderfully done. They all contribute to Bloodlines playing host to some of the more creative and unique level designs in the Castlevania franchise. But let's not discount the non-special graphics that doesn't require trickery to pull off. The various heroes, enemies, and bosses in this game are all wonderfully drawn, smoothly animated, and just a joy to see in action. The varied set pieces and level backdrops are also well done, as each new stage brings something new to the table, even the few stages that seem similar in design. I'll even forgive the few bits of distortion that might occur on occasion, because Konami did such a wonderful job with the graphics in Bloodlines, pushing the Genesis hardware to produce something near beautiful. Oh, did I mention this game was bloody? Yeah, that's something of an added bonus. Unless you lived in Europe, then you just got water. In terms of sound, well, okay, the sound effects aren't exactly the game's strong point, but they're not quite terrible. They're tolerable at best, but not much more than that. On the other hand, the music is fantastic. I've got to admit, this is quite possibly one of my favorite video game soundtracks, as each and every soundtrack is mesmerizing, quirky, and does an excellent job of fitting with the mood of the game. Although comprising mostly of new tunes, there's a couple remixes of classic Vania tunes here and there. All sound great, no complaints. Overall, Castlevania Bloodlines is a genuinely engrossing experience, serving as one of the best all-around video games on the Sega Genesis Mega Drive thing, and also one of the Castlevania series' finest moments. Despite the technical limitations of the console at work, Bloodlines manages to surprise with some of its visual effects, creative level design, deep atmosphere, and overall excellent gameplay that stays true to what made this series great while adding its own bit of flair. To overlook this gem of a game is a huge, almost sinful disservice, as it can almost most certainly hold its own among the best games in the series, and even some of the shining gems on the Genesis. Simply put, if you're a fan of old school Castlevania and you haven't had the chance to play Bloodlines, then what the f*** is wrong with you? Go hunt down a Mega Drive or a Genesis or a clone equivalent, close that K-Gen window or I'll ram the f*** straight up your ass with my foot. Go find yourself a copy of Bloodlines and play it.